Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt in Studio West. Noah Rothman is the National Review's senior political writer, weekly guest of mine. Hello, Noah. Quite a lot going on. I wanted you to comment specifically about a couple of things. Over the weekend, Donald Trump hit the Houthis hard. Apparently, no one told the Houthis that the Biden regency was over. And so he hit them hard. And then last night, Israel resumed the war against Gaza, thus far only from the air. No reports of ground troops. So that's not changed yet today. What do you think is unfolding? Is it possibly, as I heard on commentary speculated by Jonathan Shanzer this morning, that we're getting close to the end game with Iran and that Trump and Bibi are going to finish off the nuclear program?
Well, Jonathan's assessment, I can't necessarily speak to. I certainly hope he's right. I do think it's impossible to separate the Trump administration's strikes on the Houthis with a promise that it is a sustained campaign from the resumption of hostilities in Gaza. We're talking about two Iranian proxies, both of which operate at the beneficence and the behest of Iran. And you cannot distinguish the Iranian apparatus from the terrorist organizations in its orbit. That's the head of the snake. You know, you can go after all these various proxy organizations, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Shiite militias in Iraq and Jordan, and the Houthis and Iran. And as I said on the editors today, Iran hasn't been weaker than it is now since the 1979 revolution. This is the opportunity to maximize the groundwork that the Israelis have done in degrading all the arms through which Iran could mete out some sort of a retaliation for example, strikes that aim to neutralize, if not seriously degrade, the Iranian nuclear program. The time is now, and the president seems rather torn, frankly, when he talks about this subject. Sometimes he says, this is a message to Iran, as he said last night with these strikes. Other times he entertains the notion of a new JCPOA-like Iran nuclear deal, which I understand is tempting, but I think is a folly, a pursuit that is unlikely to yield results. So time will tell. It's certainly way overdue to reimpose some deterrence on the Houthis. But the way to deter conflict is to deter conflict. That's to present the enemy with conditions that suggest you will not be able to absorb the amount of pain we can mete out. You will not achieve your goals militarily. We should be applying that lesson broadly. Right now, we're applying it to the Iranians. Long overdue, but I look forward to seeing more signs that this administration is as committed to neutralizing this threat.
I want to add a little context here. The Iranian Revolution to which Noah refers occurred in 1979 when the Shah was overthrown by the Ayatollah Khomeini. Since that time, there have been only two supreme rulers, Khomeini and Khamenei. They both held the same job. Khamenei took over when Khomeini died in 1989. The only time it's been weaker than right now was probably in the aftermath of Operation Praying Mantis when Ronald Reagan sunk the Iranian Navy in 1988 when they began the tanker war and they pulled their way back. But that was before the IRGC, before this ring of fire. And systematically over 7 months, Israel, not with a great deal of help from us, they got a bear hug from us, but not everything they needed. They decimated Hamas. They've destroyed Hezbollah. Assad is gone, and Iran has been defenestrated of its air defenses. And I think the Houthis got hit pretty hard a couple of times by the Israelis and a couple of times by the Americans. But as I understand, and Senator Cotton put it yesterday, Noah, what the president said when he first came is, we can do this the hard way or the easy way, Iran, but we're going to do it. You can either lock down your nuclear weapons program, as did South Africa and Ukraine. You can denuclearize, or we can denuclearize for you. And Tom Cotton left the impression with me, and I think it's correct, and I think Khamenei thinks it's correct as well. They don't get a choice about whether or not they do it. They're going to do it. It's just they get a choice about how to do it.
Yeah, I think so. The nuclear disarmament conversation, I think, is instructive insofar as the South African model, the Ukrainian model, and to a lesser extent the Brazilian model, Argentinian model, is that the security environment in their regions changed dramatically. In South Africa's case, it was domestic change in its regime and the subsequent posture of the neighboring states, the collapse of the Soviet Union, détente in South America. These are the sort of things that can convince a regime to abandon a nuclear weapons program peacefully. I don't think that option is on the table for Iran. I think its region is going to remain hostile from its perspective. And also the Praying Mantis example, as you mentioned, Operation Praying Mantis, and the Soleimani strike to a lesser extent.
Yes.
Both of them demonstrate a truism that the Iranian regime, elements within the Iranian regime, react with existential terror whenever they are faced with the prospect of a real hot conflict with the United States. Those elements within the regime understand that they would not survive such a conflict. And they react by de-escalating. It's a, escalate to de-escalate strategy. It's the sort of thing that works with Iran. It doesn't necessarily work everywhere. It does work with Iran, and Iran cannot be allowed to have a bomb. It has.
No, I think it's going to happen, and fairly quickly. Do you?
I don't know. I think now is the time to do it. I'm hesitant to say that there are elements within this administration. I know there are elements within the administration that want to do it. I know there are elements within the administration that regard it as so reckless that it cannot even be envisioned, especially given the degree to which America's focus should be on the Pacific, not in the Middle East, not in Europe. So that debate, I think, is raging within the administration. I don't know where it's going.
I'm counting on Rubio and Waltz persuading the president to go with his instincts. Let me ask you about Judge Boasberg. I haven't heard the new editors. I'll listen to that this afternoon. But the last editors, when you and Dominic were talking about this, and Dominic and I had an exchange on X, I try and be gentlemanly about this. But this is in my opinion, non-justiciable political question that the judge ought to punt to the D.C. Circuit, dismiss, and allow the ACLU to take up to the circuit. If they want to get involved, they can get involved, and the court can decide. I don't like this district court judge eating up precious time of the President of the Department of Justice by ordering answers to questions that are classified. I don't like anything about this. The Article 3 power is separate from the Article 2 power. I'm wondering what you thought of that hearing yesterday. I really think this judge ought to back off, dismiss the case, and if they want to take it up to the circuit's got more gravitas. It's got better judges, longer serving judges. This guy's a good judge, by the way. He's a lefty, but he's a good judge. He's the chief judge of the district, but he's a district court judge. He should not be screwing around in this area.
Well, everybody wants this fight. I'm disinclined to wade into legal precedent. That's not my field. However, I'm familiar with the 1948 decision on this 1798 law, which regards it, as far as I understand it, as a non-justiciable issue when the president or his officers want to remove people citing this law, that it's non-justiciable in the condition in which the Congress has declared war. It was invoked three times.
Yeah, that is not actually, it's a case of first impression. It's never been decided before because that was predicated by a declaration of war. This is predicated by a declaration of the president, which is provided for in the statute, but has never before been used. So it's zone one under Justice Jackson's three zones, but it's never been decided before.
Yeah, and the Trump administration wants clarity from this, from the Supreme Court and appellate courts, and they might get it. I can't speak to the law on this issue. I can speak to the politics of it. The politics of it are that the administration clearly wants a fight over this. They are sound ground with the public when it comes to immigration. All the policies that pollsters have tested with regard to Trump, immigration gets the highest marks. Voters are appreciative of the restoration of some sanity to our border enforcement regime and our immigration regime. That said, when you start to pick fights with the courts and allege, as Caroline Leavitt has alleged and Pam Bondi has alleged, that this judge in particular has a soft spot for criminality and gang criminality, I think you're going to start to see the president run up against procedural arguments. They're going to have to.
And stay with me through the break, Noah, because there's a real risk here of political damage to the president if they either sent a United States citizen by mistake, or if they sent Venezuelans to their death in El Salvador. I want to ask your opinion on that afterwards. So Noah, I'm back with Noah very quickly off air. We'll put it on the YouTube. No, there is a story that perhaps there is a United States citizen among those who were deported. That would be a massive, terrible political error if they screwed that up, because you can't deport an American citizen. So I'm going to stipulate that, and I assume you agree. What do you make of the analogy that they're sending the TDAs, Venezuelans, to El Salvador with MS-13? It's like sending the Nazis. It's like sending Wehrmacht troops to the Soviet Union. I mean, they're not coming back. I'm not real comfortable with that either. What do you think about that?
Yeah. Well, that's a pretty grim analogy that you drew there.
Isn't it on point?
I understand it.
They're gangs.
Well, there hasn't. I'm uncomfortable with the degree to which the administration shot first and asked questions later. It doesn't seem to have done the due diligence to actually charge these alleged gang members, much less allow them due process their hearings for pre-deportation. And yeah, that could start to get really sticky, because initially you're going to issue these arguments to say the judge is out over his skis, his sympathies are suspects, try to make a big political argument there. But eventually you have to argue with the courts on the court's terms and make a legal argument that satisfies a judge. And when you do that, you are going into process. And the old political shibboleth is that when you're going into process, when you're talking process, you're losing because your opponent gets to boil his message down into a single sentence, something that's emotionally satisfying and gratifying and hard to argue with, like the administration has subverted due process rights here in pursuit of a political objective. Boom, simple, really easy sentence, the sort of thing that you can latch onto, as opposed to what the administration is going to have to say. And I fear that the administration will get bogged down in process arguments and eventually end up losing some of the strength of his core strength here. This is immigration.
I'm worried about
bread and butter.
I don't think they're going to lose the process arguments. I think they're going to be facts that develop after the conclusion of the legal, long after the law stuff is over, which will be done within a couple of weeks. We're going to find out what happened to these people. And
I mean, Democrats do need a sympathetic. They need, yeah, it does, and they do need a sympathetic figure around whom they can rally. Mahmoud Khalil is not going to get the job.
No.
They do need somebody who. They need somebody who is sympathetic to the majority of Americans, and deporting a citizen or a green card holder absent their due process rights really could do the trick.
Well, due process green card holders do not have due process rights in the way that citizens do, but sending someone to their death, that would be bad. Noah, thank you. Follow him on X at Noah C. Rothman. Talk to you next week, Noah. Coming right back, America.